If you've been to confession and still feel guilty afterward, you're not alone. I thought after going to confession I would finally feel free. But the guilt came back, and no one really talks about that part. So I want to share what that experience taught me about how healing actually works, and why that feeling doesn't mean something went wrong. My first confession in 15 years was actually a really healing experience. I'd set up a private confession, and the priest I spoke to was incredibly kind and welcoming. He took the time to really listen to my story, and he was so understanding of where I was coming from and what I'd been struggling with. At one point, he said something that really stayed with me. He said, "You never really left." And after I confessed everything, I felt a kind of relief that I hadn't felt in a long time. It honestly felt like a weight had been lifted off of me. Like I'd finally let go of everything I'd been carrying. All the sins, all the compromises, all the ways I drifted. And there was this real sense that my soul was free again. But that feeling didn't last. After a while, the guilt came back. And it wasn't just a vague sense of guilt. It was very specific. I started thinking about the ways I'd compromised my values, especially around my faith. I'd spent years in a relationship where I slowly learned to hide that part of myself. My boyfriend at the time had no patience for faith. And over time, I started pretending I didn't either. I pushed down the part of me that believed because it felt easier than having to constantly defend it. And then there were other areas too. Things like purity, where I knew what I believed and still found myself slowly letting that go. There wasn't one dramatic moment where the guilt came back. It was more like waking up some mornings and feeling the weight of it before I'd even gotten out of bed. I felt ashamed of things I'd done and ashamed of who I'd been. And that's where it started to feel heavier. It wasn't just, I made mistakes. It became, what does this say about me? I started to feel like I'd been weak, emotionally, spiritually, and even morally. And it didn't really come and go. It just kind of sat there. And what made it so confusing was that I knew I'd been forgiven. I knew confession worked. But I still felt this weight, like I wasn't fully free from the past. And I didn't understand what that meant. Looking back, I think the mistake I was making was in what I expected confession to do. I assumed that if I was really forgiven, then the feeling of guilt would disappear right away too. That everything would just be gone at the same time. But that's not really how it works. Confession removes the sin. It restores your relationship with God. But it doesn't always immediately remove everything you're feeling, especially the shame or the memories or the way you've come to see yourself because of those experiences. And when I didn't understand that, I started interpreting those lingering feelings as a sign that something was still wrong. It took me a while to see it differently. But what I eventually started to realize is that what I was experiencing wasn't a failure of confession. It was part of the healing process. Forgiveness and healing are connected, but they're not the same thing. Forgiveness can happen in a moment when the priest gives you absolution. But healing, especially the emotional and interior kind, usually takes time. There were still things I needed to work through. The shame I was carrying, the way I'd internalized those experiences, and the way I was still judging myself because of them. And one of the biggest things I had to learn was how to forgive myself. Not because God hadn't already forgiven me, but because I was still holding those things against myself. That deeper kind of healing didn't happen all at once. It happened gradually, as I stayed close to God and started to understand His mercy in a deeper way. A lot of that came through seeing how Jesus actually treated people who'd sinned. The woman caught in adultery, Peter after he denied Christ 3 times. Jesus demonstrates so much gentleness in those moments, so much patience and kindness. It made me realize that the way I was relating to myself was very different from the way God was relating to me. And it didn't happen overnight, but slowly and surely, I started to let go of my past and to look at myself with more kindness. So if you've been to confession and you still feel guilty, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It might mean that healing is still unfolding and God is still working in you. If that's where you are right now, that's okay. You're allowed to take this at your own pace. It won't always feel so heavy. And through all of this, God's not finished with you yet. Thank you for being here. God bless.